While America has been looking inward, two of its oldest allies have been quietly building a new partnership, one that's starting to reshape the global balance of power. This isn't a story you'll see leading the nightly news, but its effects are real and growing every day. The world has entered a new, dangerous, and divided era. In this new reality, old alliances are being tested and reforged. A quiet divergence is happening on the North American continent, and a new transatlantic partnership is rising in its place. This is the story of how Canada and the European Union are building a new kind of Western alliance, and why the United States is, for the first time, on the outside looking in. For most of our lives, the global pecking order seemed pretty set in stone. There was the United States, and there was everyone else. Its economic muscle, military power, and cultural gravity were just unmatched. Its closest allies, like Canada, lived in its orbit, their policies often tied to the pull of Washington. But the world is changing. Global instability, trade disputes, and the feeling of an increasingly unpredictable American partner have pushed nations to rethink who they depend on. And while America was busy with its own internal issues and global power struggles, Canada and the EU began a quiet, deliberate project to build an alternative. This isn't just about one trade deal or a few polite diplomatic handshakes. This is about the slow, methodical integration of two of the world's major economies, a process that has sped up dramatically in recent years. It's a story that's unfolding in high-stakes summits, in the fine print of defense policy, and in the agreements that are creating a new economic and strategic reality. We're talking about a partnership that now covers everything from cybersecurity and defense procurement to artificial intelligence and critical mineral supply chains. A new axis is forming, one that connects North America to Europe, not through Washington, but around it. To understand how we got here, and more importantly, where this is all going, we need to look at the concrete steps that have brought the EU and Canada closer than ever before. If you want to understand the forces reshaping our world before they become front-page news, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. We connect the dots on the big shifts, and what's happening between Canada and the EU is a story you can't afford to miss. The story of this deepening EU-Canada alliance begins with two landmark agreements that laid the groundwork for everything to come: CETA and the SPA. First, let's talk about CETA, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. When it was provisionally applied back in 2017, it was one of the most ambitious trade deals the EU had ever signed. It eliminated 98% of tariffs, opening up huge new markets for both Canadian and European businesses. But CETA was always meant to be more than just a free trade deal. It was a strategic statement, a shared commitment to an open, rules-based world order, at a time when those principles were being challenged. And the results have been impressive. Since provisional application began, two-way trade in goods and services between the EU and Canada has surged. A 2023 report showed that total bilateral trade had grown over 65% compared to pre-CETA levels in 2016. By 2023, the total trade relationship was valued at $123 billion. This wasn't just a small bump. It was a significant shift in their economic centers of gravity. But CETA was only half of the equation. Signed alongside it was the Strategic Partnership Agreement, or SPA. If CETA was the economic engine of the new relationship, the SPA was its political and strategic framework. This agreement created the formal structure for deep cooperation on global issues: peace and security, counterterrorism, human rights, and climate action. It established dozens of bilateral dialogues, embedding Canadian officials deep within the EU's institutional machinery. The SPA was a game changer. It transformed the relationship from a mainly economic one into a real strategic partnership. It committed both sides to working together on global challenges, effectively aligning their foreign policy views. Like CETA, the SPA has been provisionally applied since 2017, but both agreements are still waiting for full ratification from all EU member states, highlighting the political complexities involved. Together, CETA and the SPA created a powerful symbiotic relationship. CETA provided the economic weight, binding the two economies together. The SPA provided the strategic direction, making sure that economic partnership was used for shared geopolitical goals. This wasn't an accident. It was a strategy, and it was just the beginning. The world was about to get a lot more complicated, and this foundation would soon be put to the test. If CETA and the SPA laid the foundation, the geopolitical turmoil of recent years was the catalyst that put everything into high gear. A revanchist Russia, an assertive China, and an America that seemed to be turning inward created a deep sense of instability. For both Canada and the European Union, the lesson was clear. In a more dangerous world, you need reliable partners. This led to a series of historic agreements. In June 2025, leaders met in Brussels for the EU-Canada Summit. Out of that meeting came the EU-Canada Security and Defense Partnership, a landmark pact to deepen cooperation on everything from maritime and cybersecurity to countering disinformation and supporting Ukraine. European Council President Antonio Costa said the relationship had hit an unprecedented level, while Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney called Canada the most European of all the countries that aren't in Europe. These weren't just friendly words. They were a recognition of a new strategic reality. The partnership was explicitly designed to complement NATO, strengthening transatlantic security at a time when the commitment of its biggest member, the United States, was being openly questioned. But the most revolutionary step came next. The Defense Pact opened the door for Canada to join something called SAFE, the Security Action for Europe program. SAFE is a massive $150 billion EU initiative designed to boost the continent's defense industry and fund the joint purchase of military hardware. Think of it as a European defense fund, created to rearm the continent and reduce its historic reliance on American military technology. For decades, Canada's defense industry had been almost exclusively tied to the United States. Joining SAFE changes that equation. In December 2025, negotiations for Canada's participation were officially concluded. By February 2026, Canada formally joined the SAFE program, becoming the first and only non-European country to gain this level of access. This move is a huge deal. It gives Canadian defense companies the ability to bid on massive European military projects and allows Canada to partner with European nations on buying everything from air defense systems to ammunition. In a joint statement, the EU and Canada said the goal was to create resilient defense supply chains between our industries. In other words, they were building a unified transatlantic defense industrial base, one that could function with or without the United States. And the integration didn't stop there. In parallel, Canada became an associate member of Horizon Europe, the EU's giant $95 billion research and innovation program. The agreement gives Canadian scientists access to world-leading projects on an equal footing with their EU counterparts, tackling everything from AI and quantum computing to climate change. Canada is the first country in the Americas to get this status. What we're seeing is a systematic, multi-layered process of integration. It's happening in trade, in foreign policy, in defense, and in science. Taken together, these agreements represent something profound. The construction of a new, deeply integrated transatlantic bloc, built on the conviction that they can no longer rely solely on their old protector. This deepening EU-Canada alliance isn't happening in a vacuum. It is both a response to and a cause of a growing divergence in North America. For over a century, the Canada-US relationship was defined by its unique closeness. But the political and economic ground is shifting, creating a continental drift that would have been unthinkable just a decade ago. The America First doctrine, with its transactional view of alliances and use of tariffs against even its closest partners, shattered the old way of doing things. This has forced a deliberate pivot in Canadian policy, away from its traditional dependence on the US and toward Europe. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has been direct about this strategy, with his government elected on a mandate to diversify Canada's partnerships. This isn't just talk, it's a strategic reorientation born out of necessity. When faced with an unpredictable neighbor to the south, Canada is building a counterweight across the Atlantic. This is where the EU-Canada alliance becomes so critical. It's not just about creating new opportunities, it's about managing risk. It's about ensuring Canada isn't left isolated. The partnership with the EU provides economic resilience, diplomatic influence, and now, a genuine alternative for security and defense cooperation. This isn't about replacing the United States. It's about rebalancing a relationship that has become dangerously one-sided. The United States, for its part, seems to be watching this unfold. For decades, Washington was the undisputed center of the Western alliance. The idea that Canada could, or would, build a parallel strategic track with Europe simply wasn't on the radar. The SAFE Agreement, in particular, represents a direct challenge to the primacy of the American military-industrial complex. By joining Europe's defense ecosystem, Canada is sending a clear message. It will no longer be a captive market. This gives Ottawa leverage in future negotiations with Washington and ensures that its military isn't solely dependent on American technology. This is the divergence. It's not a dramatic break, but a quiet structural drift. North America is no longer a monolithic bloc. It's becoming a continent of two diverging paths. One path seems to be heading toward a more nationalist, protectionist model. The other leads toward a new form of internationalism, one anchored in a deep, multifaceted partnership with the European Union. This shift could reshape supply chains, alter investment flows, and redefine the security architecture of the Western world. This story is still unfolding, and the implications are huge. Every week, we break down these complex geopolitical shifts to give you the context you need to stay ahead. If you're finding this analysis valuable, take a moment to hit the like button and share this video with someone who needs to understand what's really happening behind the scenes. Your support helps us continue to produce this in-depth content. So, what does all this add up to? A deep trade deal, a security pact, and access to Europe's defense and research funds. What are we actually looking at? Some analysts have started calling it an economic NATO. It's a powerful analogy, not an official term, but it captures the essence of what's being built. Just as NATO's Article 5 guarantees that an attack on one is an attack on all, this new network of agreements creates a system of mutual economic and strategic support. It's a pact built for the 21st century, on the idea that economic security is national security. Let's break down what this economic NATO looks like in practice. First, you have integrated supply chains. The EU and Canada are actively working to build resilient supply chains for everything from critical minerals and EV batteries to semiconductors, reducing their collective dependence on unreliable actors. Second, you have a unified defense market. Through the SAFE program, Canada and the EU are creating a transatlantic defense industrial base. This isn't just about buying and selling weapons. It's about joint development and shared industrial capacity. When a Canadian company and a German company can collaborate on new drone technology funded by the EU to be used by both Canadian and European armies, that is a level of integration far beyond a simple alliance. Third, you have regulatory and values-based alignment. The EU-Canada partnership is explicitly rooted in shared democratic values. This translates into practical cooperation on everything from setting standards for AI to fighting disinformation. In a world increasingly divided between democratic and autocratic models, Canada and the EU are creating a regulatory bloc, a vast economic space governed by a shared set of rules. This is why the economic NATO concept is so fitting. It describes a partnership that is more than a free trade zone, but not a formal political union. It's a security alliance, but one whose power comes as much from economic and industrial integration as from military might. This brings us to the question of EU membership for Canada. The idea has generated surprising buzz, with some recent polls suggesting nearly half of Canadians are open to the idea of joining the EU. However, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has stated he would not aim for Canada to join the EU, though he supports closer ties. And experts point out the immense geographic and political hurdles. But focusing on formal membership misses the point. What's emerging is a new model of partnership. Through CETA, the SPA, SAFE, and Horizon Europe, Canada is gaining many of the benefits of EU integration without the full political commitments of membership. It's a custom-built partnership that is redefining what it means to be an ally in the modern world. This emerging bloc has the potential to act as a third democratic superpower, a counterweight to both the United States and China, combining Europe's market power with Canada's resources and expertise. So where does this all lead? We are at a genuine crossroads. The era of American unipolarity is over, and the shape of our new multipolar world is being decided right now. The deepening EU-Canada alliance is a key part of that story. Let's consider the possible scenarios. One scenario is the formalization of this new transatlantic bloc. While full EU membership for Canada remains unlikely, we could see new institutions that solidify the partnership, like a permanent joint security committee or even deeper economic integration. This would effectively create a new pillar of the Western world, an integrated economic and security space stretching from the Pacific to the Black Sea. This bloc would have a combined GDP that rivals that of the U.S. and a powerful unified voice in global affairs. The impact on the United States would be immense. It would no longer be the automatic leader of the free world. It would be one of several major democratic power centers. Washington would have to negotiate, not just dictate, and compete for influence, even with its closest historical allies. A second, more disruptive scenario is a deepening of the North American divergence. As Canada and the EU grow closer, the economic and regulatory friction with the U.S. could increase. Imagine a future where Canada fully adopts EU standards on everything from data privacy to carbon emissions. This could create a regulatory border along the 49th parallel, complicating the deeply integrated North American economy. It would be a painful process, but one that Canada might see as a necessary price for securing its long-term future with a more stable and predictable partner. Of course, there are challenges. For this alliance to reach its full potential, it has to overcome hurdles. The CETA trade agreement, years after its provisional application, still awaits full ratification by 10 EU member states. Overcoming these final obstacles will be a key test of political will. What is certain is that the old world order is not coming back. The question is no longer if the world will change, but how. The alliance being forged between Canada and the European Union offers a glimpse of one possible future, a world of multiple overlapping power centers where alliances are built not just on shared history, but on shared values and a shared vision for the future. It's a future where an ocean is not a barrier, but a bridge. What started as a quiet conversation in the corridors of Brussels and Ottawa has now broken out into the open. Through a series of deliberate strategic agreements, CETA, the SPA, the Security and Defense Partnership, and accession to programs like SAFE and Horizon Europe, Canada and the European Union are building one of the most integrated partnerships in the world. This is happening because the world has changed. The old certainties are gone. In this new, more dangerous environment, Canada and the EU have looked at the global chessboard and made a calculated choice to build a new partnership based on mutual trust and a common interest in a stable, rules-based world. This alliance is a direct challenge to the old way of doing things. It's causing a divergence in the long-standing unity of the North American continent and signaling the rise of a new transatlantic power center that no longer revolves solely around Washington. We are witnessing the birth of what some call an economic NATO, a bloc with the potential to act as a third democratic superpower. The road ahead won't be easy, but the direction of travel is clear. A new Western alliance is being born, and it is reshaping the geopolitical map before our very eyes. The North America we once knew is changing, and the world will have to adapt. What do you think? Is this new EU-Canada alliance the beginning of a new world order or a temporary reaction to global instability? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.